Hello, my name is Jill LeBihan. I'm Head of Student Engagement and I work in Student Engagement Evaluation and Research. In this short video, I'm going to talk about what we might mean by student engagement. Student engagement in the sector has been referred to as a buzzword and a fuzzword, and that's because it has so many meanings and dimensions of meaning. Amongst other things, it can mean a student's academic and social integration, their love of the subject, their personal involvement in studies, their enthusiasm. It can also mean measurable academic practices related to learning outcomes. So the sorts of things that are measured by the National Student Survey or the UK Student Experience Survey. Things like a student's assessment of their own time spent on task, but also proxy measures for engagement such as most commonly attendance or their use of the VLE, their swipe-ins into the library. Engagement can be indicated by extracurricular activities and the student's involvement in those. How many societies do they take part in? How is a student making use of the entire university experience? Are they on campus a lot? Are they involved in coming to extra activities, extra lectures after hours, those sorts of things? Finally, and this is where I want to spend the rest of the time in this presentation, is talking about students employed to work alongside us as change agents, in partnership, as co-creators, working with us on special projects. On this slide, I want to talk to you about a student engagement paradigm that was outlined by Alex Bols and Tom Lowe. They talk about student engagement as having a number of different dimensions. So they talk about student representation on one side, and they talk about individual engagement on the other. So students who might be elected as representatives or as officers in the student union on the one side, and students acting within their studies just on an individual basis. At the top of their paradigm, they have partnership, where students are working alongside the university, alongside staff in different ways. And at the bottom, they talk about a consumer-driven student, the value for money student, and that perspective as a student as consumer that might be embraced by the Office for Students' understanding of value for money. So students as partners might be involved as representatives, either elected or nominated representatives working for the student union or working within their cohort. They can also be in cooperative partnerships as part of project workers, perhaps paid as ambassadors or influencers. They can be consumer rights champions or watchdogs, and they can be working as individual agents through something like a complaints process. This is a more fleshed out model, the same paradigm from Bols and Lowe. They talk about the representative partnership dimension, cooperative partnership at the top of the paradigm, and the consumer rights, consumer driven, and perhaps in some cases individual agency at the bottom of this paradigm. So you can see that there are pros and cons to some of this partnership work. Where students might work as elected partners or elected representatives, they might feel more part of a community, they might feel joint ownership of the academic experience, they might be able to feel a greater ownership of their learning because they have some input into it. They feel that their voice is heard and listened to and responded to. This of course has time implications. You have to spend the time working with the students to prepare them to attend meetings. You have to build in time to have those discussions. And for some students, they might not want to take on that responsibility around representation. Not all students want ownership of their learning. They would rather be provided with everything, a more instrumental mindset, if you will. Students as consumer rights champions, perhaps working through the student union, might operate in a way of getting recourse when perhaps financial waivers when things go wrong. They might work positively as a way of holding the institution to account through something like the Student Voice Report. And they're given some power to demand change. Students might, in this sort of position, be put in a more adversarial relationship between the students and institutions. So on the con side of this can result in less trust perhaps between staff and students, and it might be that students don't feel as empowered to work alongside as part of solving a joint problem. They might pass that problem over to be fixed by the university or by staff. In the cooperative side of the partnership, where you've got projects, you've got a community of practice perhaps rather than a customer and service provider model, people working together towards a joint and shared interest in making things better and improving both the staff and student experience and staff and student experience of university life. There are some downsides of it. It might be that the projects are selective, that they're not of interest to all students. They might not represent the interests of all students. This again can be resource intensive, both in terms of time and often money if these student roles are paid roles. And it might not be democratic, that only the super engaged students get involved in these sorts of projects. The students who have a bit of extra time, perhaps they don't have to do much more caring work or paid work outside the university. Finally, there's the individual agency side of things. Again, this is the student's customer model. There's a power perhaps given to students through their ability to give feedback through module evaluation questionnaires, through the National Student Survey and so on, and that can work to raise issues. There's a complaints process which again, if well dealt with within the university, can mean a positive enhancement of a student's experience or of the university system. There can be power given to students through social media to get things done, and to get things done with a reasonable level of urgency and immediacy. On the downside, there's potentially again a decay of that relationship, the student acting as a customer to demand things rather than take responsibility perhaps for their side of the bargain. Complaint systems require a degree of student confidence, to be perfectly honest, to work their way through a complaints process. They don't always work in the best interests of students. Policies can be formal, unfamiliar, hard to navigate, and they don't always support an individual agent. So you can see that through the partnership dimension towards the top of this paradigm and the consumer-driven dimension at the bottom, there is a spread of where the power comes, a spread of the levels of engagement required, and the spread of the way in which that works both to enhance or damage trust between the institution and individual students. Just a final reflection on student engagement. If you're trying to create something new for students, trying to improve something for students, want students to spend more time with you and get more involved in something, ask yourself, how have they been involved from the beginning in that creation, in that co-design, in that co-production of whatever it is, whether it's teaching materials, whether it's an induction activity, whether it's an informal social online event. How have you asked students to be involved with you? And from the beginning, not just at the end as the consumer, not just at the end when it's all delivered, asking them how they liked it. How have they been involved from the beginning?